Good evening, good night, and welcome to Mindful Life 322. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 7th of December. December already, 1 week in. Imagine that. Thank you for joining me. Once you're on the inside, if you're on Instagram or on TikTok, make sure you hit that like button. Double tap the screen over there on TikTok. That's how you hit the like button over there. If you are viewing this on repeat on YouTube, of course, hit that like button. Allow the algorithm to know, hey, this is some good stuff. Send it out to some more people. If you are not yet subscribed to Nathan Springer over there on YouTube, head over, subscribe to Nathan Springer there, get those numbers up. It's Thursday, so on Thursday we're just talking. Good night, Tobago, Glenroy, Dennis. Thursday we're just talking, we're chilling, whatever topics are brought up inside of the chat. We discuss, we talk about, we ask the questions on a Thursday. That's what we're doing, so feel free to jump in. Yes, RL, though, we do have a bit of central bank influence on those prices because we don't have a fully floating exchange rate with US dollars. So every now and again, the central bank has to get in there and the government has to get in there to try and, ratchet the numbers a bit. Cheat the numbers to make sure it remains at a certain level. The government expects us to choose ultimatums, be rich and have a car, or ride a bike, just Jenny says. If your car's engine is expensive to replace, don't use CNG or this new Ramco conversion. So it's risky on the engine is what you're saying. RL says, I saw this starting to exploit the ocean floor now for minerals, so those rare minerals are available. Are they? Are you sure? Are they enough? Are they accessible? What would the environmental cost be of scraping the ocean floor for minerals? Electric vehicles are death traps computerized with AI smart grid control, Glenroy Dennis says. Well, I don't know necessarily if I'll call them death traps, but electric vehicles do put you under the control, do put you a lot more under central control. I recently saw a finance minister talking about they're still heading in a cashless direction, and he doesn't understand why people are against cashless, like they just don't want to pay their taxes. And that's some of it because people don't like and trust governments. So if you're in an electric vehicle, you have much less independence. If you are one of those people that you're more concerned about government and the authorities having influence on you, well, electric vehicle is a sure way to put yourself under their control, because there's a high chance your engine will be damaged. Yikes. Just Jenny says, I think we need to start talking options like bamboo, solar, and hemp. Seriously. Options in terms of building materials, etc. Options in terms of what exactly? Because I agree that we should be talking about those options, but many of those options are utilized already. They are utilized in many cases. If something is by and large profitable, companies will do it because they are in it for the profit. That's kind of how it goes. But yes, it's a Thursday, people. So are there any comments, questions, anyone want to jump in and discuss? You can click that join and discuss button over there on TikTok. Click that guest button and jump in and we can talk. We need to fix the flooding issue. That's what. I don't know. There is always, not always, but there is more we can do about flooding. But there will always be flooding. Flooding is a natural part of the cycle, of the water cycle, the hydrological cycle. Rivers flood. They are supposed to flood. Rivers, when you learn rivers, they teach you about a part of the river called the flood plains. They are called the flood plains because they flood. Now, we could probably manage floods better. We could decide that we don't want to live around floods as much. We could build buildings more suitable to flooding zones. There are many different things we can do, but totally stopping floods from happening, I don't think that's one of them. I don't believe that option is in the books for us. Building and fuel needs a sustainable push on a large scale. I've spent time looking at this. I fed up here people say is clogged drains. It's much more complicated than that. That is true. It's much more than clogged drains. Flooding is due to poor urbanization. Not only, not only, but significantly, yes. Now, okay, Glenroy. Now, when you look at areas like Port of Spain, you see that, and you when it comes to urbanization, you need central planning. That's just the reality of something like urbanization. You see, if everyone in 20 square kilometers builds a building and concretes all of their surfaces, so you basically have 20 square kilometers of hard concrete surface. Anytime rain falls there, every single droplet of rain must find a route above the land into a waterway in a short period of time. That's a recipe for flooding. That's why if 3 people spit in unison in Port of Spain, you end up with a flood. The flood mightn't last for a very long time, but it happens very quickly because you have so many hard surfaces. All of the water must run off on the top. So yes, there is some poor urbanization in that. Yes, when you see every single one of your neighbors want to cast their entire house yard, you understand that's not an ideal thing. So yes, there is that part of it. There is the reality of poor urbanization that will lead to increased flooding and all of that. But again, there is a part of it that is just the reality of living near waterways. Water overflows banks. And everybody building their house on different height when backfilling, correct? And some people don't want a drain to run in front their yard or behind their yard and some kind of nonsense like that. Huh. Port of Spain, Friday Forever says Port of Spain was the sea. I pray that the sea does not take back what is its own. Well, some of Port of Spain was the sea. Yes, that's true. You talk about the Venegai War already. I miss it. No. We didn't talk about that. At least not in totality yet. We're just browsing. We're talking. So, I mean, we can talk about it. There are discussions to be had. I was looking on Twitter. You know, I was kind of waiting for my boy Trini Hotep to jump in. I know sometimes these days he comes in pretty late. I was looking over on Twitter there, and some of those communists, some of those left-wing people are on Team Venezuela, trying to steal pieces of Guyana out there and in support of it, because somehow Guyana is a puppet state of the colonial powers because they were once held by Britain. But that doesn't pertain to Venezuela, even though they were once held by Spain as a colonial power too. These communists are thieves. Stay away from them. The Caribbean sucks at good urbanization, but we can try. I mean, I agree, Just Jenny. I agree. But it's because a lot of it isn't planned. It's sporadic. A large for the large part. The entire Laventille. Hey, I got a call. Hey, Ronnie. The entire Laventille region, etc. It's kind of sporadic settlement, and that's a lot to do with it. The urbanization was sporadic, and now that we have some of those things already created in that way, how do we change it? The Caribbean, you have to appreciate that some of the leaders have a difficult job also. They got these countries already moving along in a certain direction when the colonial powers gave them over. So you understand that it's not exactly the most straightforward thing to undo or redo or change. Very true, I've had enough of all these highways in Trinidad. If you have a main city on a peninsula of the country with very few ways to get in and centralize everything around that city, what do we expect but traffic? What do we expect but traffic? They can't enforce building standards now after infrastructure is already built. Correct. To enforce building standards in Trinidad, there are many, many, many buildings that would have to be broken down. Like I heard, I was listening I-95, you know, that the kind of old people talk station. Someday I was taking it in, listening some of their views and stuff. They were talking about the guard boot in Bamboo. And a lot of callers and opinions were like, the government's supposed to mash that down, break it down, it's illegal. I mean, it's illegal, so the government's supposed to break it down. They frighten her. And in my mind, I'm like, lots of y'all, if y'all were in governance, we're not breaking down that building either. Like, I don't understand what some people think governance is. Y'all want governance like Maduro, or the Saudis, or Qatar, or China, or maybe even Russia, not exactly, but something like that. You all want extreme authoritarianism, really and truly. You cannot just go mashing things down. That's just not how it works. And listen, there are lots of lawyers in Trinidad and Tobago waiting for the opportunity. And if you start breaking down illegal structures in Trinidad and Tobago, you may never stop. There are some who claim Grand Bazaar, which is right next to the Bamboo, was initially an illegal structure also in part. There are some who claim that the entirety of the Bamboo itself is an illegal structures. And I mean, if we're talking ideally and urban planning, if you're planning where to put people, you're not going to put people on the banks of this country's main river. I mean, we don't have very large rivers in this country, but when it comes to rivers, one of our main rivers is the Caroni River. Do you put an entire settlement on the banks of the Caroni River where Bamboo is located? No, you don't. So if you're talking ideal in planning where to put people, you would remove that entire settlement. But can you do that? Is it within the realm of possibility for some government to come into Trinidad and Tobago and say, well, the entirety of the Bamboo is on illegal land, let's blow it all down? Who's going to do that? I stand up in Port of Spain yesterday and nobody have a guttering. Water going from roof to road, it must flood. Grand Bazaar's Regional Corporation completion certificate is probably still pending. Listen, if you have enough money, you could get nearly anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's no longer pending. We don't have resources like Sweden to completely transform our urban areas. Resources and to some extent cooperation too. There's division. So if the PNM government attempts to do that in the Bamboo, for sure it's not going to. Maybe, possibly, the UNC government might be able to get through it that if they convince the people they have their best interests at heart. But when these are, again, I regularly say this, the problems that we get with multiculturalism, where people of different in-groups sometimes, they lack the trust with each other in the first place also. So it's even harder to get some of those things done. In North Korea, they would, well, yeah, they would in North Korea. In Vancouver, the drains are half full on normal days from litter backup. So when rain falls, it easily floods. Yup. The litter is a factor. There are many litter bugs, and it's true when you could tell that litter is a factor that by the fact that when you see the flood shows you a lot of litter. But to me, even the fact that there is so much litter kind of is symptomatic of what exactly the problem is. People ill-treat a place when they don't have that kind of connection to it. So, in the first place, someone who is littering in the country, they don't have much care for the country. So, don't know if you know the secondary school in Penal that no one can agree to complete building. Our government is at war all the time. That's true. I don't know the school, but you regularly see things like that. One government starts a project, the other government has no intention of finishing it because they don't want to make the next government look good. And no one benefits really and truly. Speaking of the secondary school in Pinal, you don't have to go to the secondary school only. Isn't there a University of the West Indies branch that was being built down in Pinal, down in South somewhere there, and it's yet to be utilized some hundred and something $1 million later? Torres Villalva over on Instagram says if the PNM tries to move Bamboo, will be tantamount to the UNC trying to relocate Lavantil and Nelson Street. Exactly. It's going to be a difficult thing. And even, let's look at some of the logistics of that. When the government is talking about urban revitalization and all of those things on the Nelson and going east port of Spain there, are you going to be able to move all of those people the way you want, when you want? Are you? Like, and with good reason. If I am a Nelson Street gangster, and I know that I have enemies in some of the streets and areas to the east of me in the vicinity there, am I going to let the government just pluck me up from my home territory and relocate me some random place? No. Those things aren't going to necessarily be that easy. Look, Hoover Hospital, for example, they still ain't officially opened that hospital. Well, it was a quarantine center for a while. Just Jenny says, you in Davy. I went to the school next door and it was meant to be open when I graduated. Never did. Sad situation, isn't it? Gregory Selby says, upgrade the drainage system. Good night, Ronnie. What going on, girl? You had your taco, and your tequila already? No. Repeat it.
I was asking I want to see enlightenment or how the comparison and contrast. I'm sorry, that's it. How we can contrast the Venezuela guy and as well. That's Israel Palestine situation because it's basically the same thing you're saying, right? Claiming that stolen and the Palestine people claim that their land was Israelite, Israel. I don't know. So basically sharing the same kind of even to that's a deep saying, you know, my people.
I think in the compare and contrast, I would actually compare it more to the Russia-Ukraine than to the Palestine-Israel, even though people are drawing parallels all around. Now, to the Palestine-Israel, there's some comparison because the British colonial power, the British Empire, was involved in both cases. The British Empire had the British Mandate in Palestine, which was the division of the region. And some people blame them for it. Now, bear in mind the Ottomans were in power there, and it was colonial powers all the way down, and the history is much more complicated than that, but be that as it may. Now, for the Guyana-Venezuela issue, though, they don't have the same kind of history that Palestine-Israel has. The Palestinian-Israel conflict, the Palestinians are claiming history there. Some of them are claiming to actually be Jews, descendants of the Jews who were originally there. Some of them are claiming to have been there for at least 1,500 years when various people moved into the region. And the Israelis, both Guyana and Venezuela, both have a significant indigenous population. So you can't claim that one group is indigenous to the land, so the land is owed to them more than the other. So that claim cannot be made there. They're talking more about historical lines drawn. That's more what it's about. Now, the thing is, some people are referring to the colonial side of it. The Venezuelan lines that they are claiming were lines that were basically, if you're using the modern term for it, stolen land from the indigenous people. And they drew lines randomly all around the place that they own this property because they just stopped and staked their claim on it. The British did basically the same thing. To me, trying to get a moral argument as to who is better between the Spanish between the Spanish and the British in that case, I don't think you could get a clear argument. Are, are you hearing me now? Hearing me now? Yeah. A phone call came in.
I don't know.
Nah, a phone call came in. That's why that happened. But yeah. So the to try and get one as being the morally superior one, I don't think that claim makes sense. So to me, like the best idea there is looking at the history of who administrated the land, not at random lines drawn in the land from 100 years ago, because that's kind of what they were claiming. The lines, the Dutch had that land before the British. When the Dutch handed it over to the British, the border between the two was fuzzy. That was the reasoning. Again, the border between the two was fuzzy. Hold 1 second. Yeah, I'm back. That's the delivery driver. He now coming an hour later. So, I'm telling you. Look how long. Don't worry, Gregory. I'll. Yeah. So the moral argument doesn't work. You look at who administrated the land. The Dutch handed the land over to the British. There was a blurry border. Now, the line that was originally drawn by the Spanish may have included that. Yes, no doubt. But the line that was originally drawn by the Spanish included Trinidad, Grand Venezuela, the big massive Spanish holding that Mr. Maduro is using to make his claim. Grand Venezuela included Trinidad. So if you're using those historic claims, then he could claim Trinidad too. It doesn't make sense like that. It really doesn't. And the thing is, it's not like the issue was never arbitrated. It was. They found the arbitration unfair. But all arbitrations are unfair. No one will always find the arbitrations to be fair. That's just reality. That's what's going on right now in the Middle East also. People found that the lines drawn were unfair. If the arbitration went in another direction, Guyana would have found it unfair. So what's going to go on there? The Lokono people in Essequibo will be affected greatly. Yes, as well as many other people in Essequibo. There are people in the Essequibo region. And Venezuela is talking about going ahead and starting to now administer the land and hand out gas contracts and all of this kind of madness. We'll see how it goes. Watch Chile and Argentina border. Listen, if you're going on old borders and who is supposed to be where and who is supposed to be, there are countries that used to exist that don't exist anymore. There are areas that would like to be governed by themselves. Tobago might like to leave Trinidad and they just can't on their own. It's not up to them. Hard luck. Tough. I mean, that's the history of the world. And the reality is, if you want to change it, you either have to be able to get an international organization to rule in your favor by moving your power moves as such, or you must have the military might to make it happen. What you cannot do is what Venezuela is trying to do there. You come from a position of weakness and just say, this is mine, so you're supposed to give me it because I find this is fair. That's insane. It doesn't work like that. And to some extent, there is some of that in the Palestine-Israel, and there is some of that in the Russia-Ukraine. Like in the Russia-Ukraine sense, you could say the Ukrainian side could say it's unfair for Russia to claim that land, but at the end of the day, Russia has the power to do something about it. So they are claiming it, and they have the power to do something about it. So now it's up to who has the power to stop them in that case. In the case of the Palestine-Israel thing, there was an arbitration. The arbitration wasn't liked. The one side attacked the other side and they lost. And now we're still fighting over that. Apparently, they didn't have the power to do something about it, yet they still tried to do something about it, and they're insisting that something be done about it. It's a strange thing.
But it's on what Guyana, tell them, America, set up.
That was inevitable. I said this.
No, no, no. I know what you're saying. Think that, like, um,
Well, I said this a couple days ago or last week. I said obviously what this is going to do is push Guyana closer to the United States. Guyana is not capable of fending off Venezuela on their own. Venezuela knows this, Guyana knows this. But Venezuela is not capable of taking over Guyana if the US backs them. So it's a no-brainer what Guyana is very likely going to do. And they already have a relationship with the United States. Obviously, that's the direction they were going to go in. And do you blame them? If I was in charge of Guyana, that's the direction I was going to go in also. It's nearly the only option. If Venezuela doesn't like that, then blame yourself. You are the one who pushed them in that direction. It's like when they found oil and some people are mad that they did some sweetheart deals with multinational corporations. How dare they do that? No, they should have found oil and stayed with their own people and attempt to get pickaxes and straws to dig out the oil and suck it out of the dirt. You need the money, so you have to sacrifice something and get those corporations to bring in the investment to actually get the oil money now. And now that they're getting the oil money, they may be able to do something about that. So the fact that they go to the US, I don't find that to be surprising. I find it to be obvious. I don't know how many countries around them would have a significant problem with that, though, because we're talking about Suriname, who I don't think would have an issue with the United States. We're talking Suriname. Brazil has a more left-wing leader right now. They previously had a more right-wing. But Brazil doesn't have, per se, a fictitious relationship with the US. And I don't think many South American countries would be worried about the United States compromising their territorial borders, per se. Brazil also has a much worse relationship with Venezuela. So many countries may actually be very okay with the United States being there to keep Venezuela at bay, especially if Venezuela starts trying to take territory. People are going to start to get more worried about that. But Venezuela has ties with Russia and China. Venezuela has more ties with Russia than China. And China isn't really looking for enemies like that. China is trying to play the US part too. They're trying to befriend all of these small countries. China is making investments in Guyana. China is making investments in Trinidad. China is a close partner of CARICOM. China has vested interest in remaining a close partner of CARICOM. So I don't think China, you're going to see Chinese arms and ammunition on the Venezuelan side attacking Guyana. I don't think that's the case. Russia may be more interested in doing so, but distance is also a significant problem. There's already US military forces in Guyana preparing the solars for any invasion. Yes, I know there are military there, but they're talking about setting up bases, in fact. Venezuela is the Russia of South America. What's that, Ronnie?
These ties up set up. To me, I don't, right? Not to say like Guyana was under America set up this east and west. If America really, if all they want to do is help Guyana, then all you have but to set up this is America part two. Because America have big business. To me, it just I don't feel too happy.
Ronnie, I think that's the woman in you that just is afraid of the conflict side of things. If I am Guyana and I want the US to help me, I want them to build one big Mako base right on the Guyana Venezuela border. Massive. With a Air Force strip. And land F-35s every weekend. You have a few F-35s land on and take off. That's what I want. Because you need the deterrent. That's why they build the bases there. If all you're doing is going into Guyana and helping the Guyanese soldiers get a little stronger, Guyana's army might be the size of one battalion of the Venezuelan military. That's a silly move. And if they don't have a location of forces in the vicinity, by the time Venezuela attacks, what are you going to do? Wait for American carrier to make its way across, disembark some men, let the men make their way through the jungle, and finally reach the area by the time Venezuela has already set up their own forces? I'd rather have the base right there. There isn't anything needed from Venezuela, but Guyana is a part of CARICOM. So Guyana gets the support. Well, as Ronnie pointed out, we did sign the Dragon Gas deal with Venezuela, so there's that. But I don't know how much Venezuela would care to cancel the Dragon Gas deal. The Dragon Gas deal benefits them also. Bear in mind, Venezuela is under the cloud of sanctions. They're struggling for money. They want more resources. The Dragon Gas deal wasn't only for Trinidad. It's something that benefits Venezuela too. So we'll see. We'll see how that runs. Venezuela stands to lose more here, I think, in the long run. If they engage a conflict with Guyana, which would very likely engage a conflict with the United States, that they lose, there's a high chance that the government in Venezuela also loses power. If the government loses power, who comes in?
Sorry, I cut off. So somebody question.
What was the question? That's a question? Gregory Selby. I saw that and I scrolled up looking for the question and I didn't see the question. I saw a statement. I don't know the question in there. I saw Torres ask if Guyana requests reinforcements. Do you think the government should support? I don't think Guyana would request reinforcements from us. Right. No, we're going to America. Straight to America. Said absolutely. Sorry. The chairman of CARICOM. The chairman of CARICOM, you mean? I don't know. Nah, chairman. Chairman of CARICOM. Chairman said absolutely. Why should any country company CARICOM? The CARICOM body has made a statement. They made a statement that CARICOM stands with Guyana. I'm not talking about the statement. No. Yeah, anyway, see the stuff. Don't take the car. And he said, right, like, some terrible, so no. And I'm sure so we don't actually call it woman. I said, as far as screw. Nearly every country basically said they stand with Guyana. So it's already on a certain side already. Most of the international community said that they support Guyana in this. Now, I don't know if you wanted, Ronnie, I don't know if you wanted Guyana to ask CARICOM for help. But if I was Guyana, I wasn't asking CARICOM either. Like, you want Venezuela to laugh at me or what? If CARICOM scrape up all of the reserve soldiers and send them to Venezuela, we might get what? A 2 bus full? You must be crazy. Does CARICOM have one fighter jet self? I know the Eastern Caribbean states have some kind of emergency aircraft they use every now and again. I don't think that's a fighter jet. I think it's just a plane. Our, our air guard. What does our air guard have? It, do we have one plane that could fire arms or ammunition? What you wanted from Guyana. If I was Guyana, I'm not asking CARICOM either. Like, why am I going to embarrass my neighbors like that? Why would I embarrass my neighbors like that? It's like, okay. Think about this. Think about it, right? I'm living in a community here. A neighbor that is a bad man. He is a mobster. He link up with one of the number gangs and them now, boy. He's stroppy numbers, right? And he start to harass me. He want to come and run me off of my property because he will use my house as a stash house. And I know I have some pleasant neighbors over the road, nice people, beautiful people. I invite them to the barbecue, but I know they're office folks with only daughters that go to church 3 times a week. They own no arms. They don't even have a cutlass. They don't cuss. Am I going to go to them and try to get them to deal with the bad man neighbor? No, I'm not even going to bother to embarrass my neighbor like that. I'm not even going to bother because I know I'm just going to embarrass the people. Nah. Guyana did the right. Guyana, you all did the right thing. There was no request to make of CARICOM. What were you going to ask CARICOM to do? I And what bargaining power does CARICOM have? Listen. If I am Guyana, I just looked 2 months ago and saw that the biggest CARICOM, most powerful CARICOM country, not biggest, the most powerful and wealthiest CARICOM country, Trinidad and Tobago, the mighty juggernauts of CARICOM, they had to get permission from the United States to do some little gas deal with Venezuela. Well, if I want to negotiate with Venezuela, I'm not going to talk to the people who need permission. I'm going to talk to the people who give the permission. Doesn't that make sense? I go in and talk with if they come to talk to Trinidad, to talk to Venezuela, Trinidad has to call the United States to ask the United States what we could talk to Venezuela about. So best we leave Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM out of this. Allow them to rest up. Yeah, like, we support you. You go, guys. Moral support all the way through. What you want from we? The amount of Venezuelans here we done overthrown. Torres says Caribbean Airlines done giving trouble and we want jet. Leo Princess says, hey, if I want help, I going straight to daddy. Sorry, mom. Exact. And in this case, CARICOM ain't even mom. CARICOM is your cousin. Both all at the same level. We and Guyana at the same level in that case. All Guyana military might work better in the jungle than ours. You can imagine sending our pretty boy regiment men with the new model Elantras, sending them out into the rainforest jungle down there in South America. What them boys going to do except get malaria and dengue and yellow fever? Oh gosh. Do we boys that now, man? They already have multiple families to take care of. You do know that the United States built bases in Trinidad and Tobago too. Jonathan Proof over on Instagram says, but a coalition force made up of combined Caribbean army, even just for show, is still relevant on the world scale. And I understand what you're saying about just for show. The problem is that this conflict may not be just for show. So if you like on CARICOM side, so on a Trinidad and Tobago level, maybe if we had a picture showing our TTR next to the Guyana, whatever, the GDF, Guyana Defense Force, whatever their name is, and they showed them holding guns together, that would be a nice boost for the morale of the Caribbean and all of that and all of that. But does it do anything for the actual conflict? And if you are Guyanese, who is legitimately worried about people stealing your land, do you want to have good PR right now, or do you want the biggest, baddest boys in the game to be on your side? Of course, America is not to be trusted, but the enemy of your enemy is your friend. I disagree with that statement. The enemy of your enemy could be your enemy too, just another enemy. But but I agree with the sentiment in this case, and at least from the US side, they don't have this. Like people are angry that the United States capitalism. When the United States come to Guyana, you know what they did with Exxon and those multinationals? They come and give the Guyanese so much money. They give them so much money and they paid the Guyanese. So the Guyanese gave them access to their assets because they gave the Guyanese so much money. Those evil capitalists. How dare they give the Guyanese money? Like, that's what many people, when they talk about the massive negatives that the US brought, like ExxonMobil entering Guyana, has done what for Guyana? Okay, you might argue that they are taking a bigger slice of the pie than the Guyanese are getting. That might be an argument. But the Guyanese were getting no pie without them. So, and okay, you say that the government is supposed to run this and the state runs this and really shares up the resources. Well, Venezuela has what? The #1 oil reserves in the world? And they have government running it. Yet Venezuelans are jumping off the Venezuela country like it's a sinking ship. So, I mean, like I am regularly for criticisms. I was looking on the Trinidadian Twitter while they were discussing it, and Trini Twitter is a mishmash of a set of left-wing socialist and communist weirdos, a lot of it. But some people who have the view, any team that the US backing, I am against them. And many people have this, and it's a daddy hating view, you know. That's people who grew up with daddy issues and you vex with your daddy. You need to go and forgive daddy and understand that because your daddy beat you wrongfully when you were 16 years and you didn't really take a bite of the cheese, you didn't, and you got innocent licks, that doesn't mean your daddy is the worst person in the world. The kind of idea that just because you see what the US does more directly, everybody against the US is always the better one. That is idiocy to the highest degree. That is some massive levels of clown thinking. And it's sad that there are a serious number of people that think so. The irony with it is the many of the people that think like that seem to always hang around US influenced places. They never seem to want to go live China or live Iran or live Russia. They're always in some kind of Western country talking this garbage. Strange. Very strange. Yeah, it is. That's why to me, you have to know what you're boycotting and what you're boycotting. Or like, if your boycott makes sense or if it's just, you're talking nonsense. Yeah, plenty of them are. You've got to have that. That's what you call freedom of speech, and I agree. But the irony with that, Brandon AP, is those socialist, communist, left wing people, they don't believe in freedom of speech. They use freedom of speech when liberal minded people have power. They use it to attempt to win power, and if they get power, they will stop it. Communism cannot exist with freedom of speech. Communism cannot exist with freedom on a whole. That's just the reality. It cannot exist with freedom because what the idea that everyone gets all of the things that they need. You get housing if you need it, you get healthcare if you need it, you get food if you need it. Well, those things that you need require the services of other people. And if the other people don't want to give you that service, how do you get it? Well, you have to force them to do it. So that's why freedom and communism, they just oil and water. Oil and water, they just don't mix. If Trump was in power, Guyana was not getting one drop of US support. That is insane. When Trump was in power, he actually had more sanctions on Venezuela. In the first case, the reason the sanctions lifted on Venezuela was because Trump came out of power. Some sanctions softened on Venezuela in the first place. Part of the reason they softened some of those sanctions was because they increased their sanctions on Russia because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the conflict that Trump was not for. So, yeah, I don't agree with that. I think many of the people talking anti-Trump, they don't have an accurate view of who Trump was. That's the problem I have with so many of it. Trump wasn't perfect, but many people have an extremely inaccurate view of who and what he was in terms of a president. Bear in mind, he was the only US president, probably within all of our living memories, to not start a new war. The only one. So
Every sanctions. I personally I hate sanctions, right? I don't. To me, the getting sanctioned, sanctions, right? Yeah,
sanctioned by who? I keep saying, I keep you have to understand what a sanction is. The sanction is me telling you I don't play with you. So I got to say if I'm gonna say I don't play with myself. So,
sanction, right? Venezuela sanctions, all these situations are so very. Same thing with Iran.
money,
Sanctions on
yeah.
and Israel.
Amy Claire, join the chat. Join the chat if you think it's reductionist. Go ahead, Ronnie.
So, so with the
Some might argue that the United States with the money causes war too, but I understand, and to some extent I agree. I understand why the sanctions are done. I don't think necessarily I disagree with sanctions in that I don't mind the idea of people having the freedom to negotiate, to associate with who they want to, and that's the kind of basis of sanctions, which I don't mind. The question of whether they work is another thing, and who do sanctions punish? Because Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela still lives a very lavish, wealthy life. The sanctions aren't directly punishing him. The people the sanctions hurt the most would be the regular Venezuelans. Now, again, I would say anybody has a right to sanction whoever they want. You could decide who you want to trade with, who you want to play with. It's like saying, I don't want to play with you, which is fine. But who is the one you're punishing there? This is a group. The country is a group. You're saying you don't want to play with the entire group. Are you sure you want to punish the entire group? Or might there be a better way to do it? An argument could be made there. P.S. Even war is a business just like crime. That's a fact. I don't doubt that for 1 minute. War is a business. America being sanctioned by white feminists. That is such a reductionist understanding of socialism and communism. And the reason I reduce it to that, though, Amy Claire, sorry, I was reading another name. The reason I reduce it to that is because history bears out that fact. Show me a country that dabbled in communism and remained, even for the most part, free. Freedom and communism just doesn't go together. You, the problem is intractable. Communism seeks to meet everyone's need through state power. Some of people's needs include the services from other people. The problem is always there. It's not reductionist. It's is syntax the word for that. Just in the very nature of what the thing is, it creates that issue. It always will. It always will. It always will. And that's why every single communist government you see inevitably goes down the authoritarian path. It's not a matter of necessarily they wanting to do it, but it's inevitable. Communism, you know where communism works? In small, close-knit communities. Communism works in communities, surprising. Where you have that togetherness. If we are all one family, then I regularly make this point for the people who are in the live regularly. You hear me say this over and over. If we are in a close-knit family group, a close-knit community group, then for me to work more for your benefit isn't as much a bad thing. I would work for my child's benefit all day. That's what I do. So to work for someone else's benefit within your community, not so bad. But when you're trying to talk about that on a nationwide business, you always get the freeloader problem. And once you get the freeloader problem, those who are working and carrying along the freeloaders, they don't like doing that. Once they have an option to not do it, they won't. So, in order for you to keep your communist utopia running, you have to get a way to force them to do it. Both Canada and Switzerland have had successful socialist initiatives. You go to, please do not call those Scandinavian countries socialist, because those Scandinavian countries, their leaders have over and over and over asked leftists the world over, stop calling us socialists. We are not socialists. They are not socialist countries. They have strong social safety nets. Now, you look at the history of their social safety nets. They were built up when they had their economic booms in the 20th century. If you look at most of those countries, their economies began crashing, or not crashing, but dipping with the size of their social safety nets until some of them had to reverse course. Also, much of Europe benefits from not having a military budget. Do you know why Europe does not have a military budget? Hint, it's the reason you hate America. So they don't like America because them Americans like too much guns. The guns of the Americans are protecting the Europeans right now. So many of them don't spend money on military, so they spend it on social stuff. So it's the capitalist country making enough to allow you to be socialist. Now, I am not saying socialist initiatives cannot work. I'm saying socialist countries, communist countries cannot work, where you attempt to run the entire system based on the statement is there in communism. From him according to his ability, to him according to his need. You cannot run a system like that. And this is also based on the assumption that people have to be forced to work. Okay, Amy Claire, if no one is forced to, and everyone has the option between staying home and swinging on a hammock, and then somebody has to pick up the garbage, somebody has to clean the sewer. You think there are people in the system that just love cleaning the garbage and sewer? Or do you think they do it because they are paid? Like the idea that, everyone is so magnanimous and caring. And it's so insane that we would look at the capitalist system and say everyone in the capitalist system are greedy, filthy pigs. But somehow, those same human beings, if we change the system to communist, those same greedy, filthy pigs are going to transform into utopian-minded pacifists who only have interest in helping their fellow man, and they would labor tirelessly in the field just so that their neighbors can eat. What about your experience with humankind allows you to think that is remotely true? And look at the history of socialist and communist countries. They don't work. You run out of other people's money. RL says, well, after Europe spent hundreds of years exploiting other places to build their own, obviously, they can afford socialist initiatives. Yes, that's partially true also. They had several centuries of a head start in terms of their building up of their coffers to some extent. That is part to do with it. But also, many of the countries that have those socialists, if you look at countries that have successful socialist initiatives, most of them are pretty homogenous. The same people.
I mean, social initiative thing, and they had taken up
Who? Iceland?
Ninja Ireland.
Ireland. Iceland have people. But Ireland would be a complex case in that. If you're talking about the Ireland that is part of the United Kingdom, well, I mean, there was successful strides happening in Sierra Leone before Thomas Sankara was assassinated. Okay, you may have a successful stride of socialism for a short while, but it does not. You just the man was assassinated.
And who assassinated?
I don't know. I don't know that case. I won't pretend like I know what happened there, but it does not work. It just does. Yeah. Well, I mean, nearly all assassinations may have a link to the United States when you dig all the way to the bottom. So I mean, but apparently universal basic income is being praised. I understand why people talk about universal basic income, but I think that leads to disaster in the long run. Amy Claire, the if you look at just the facts of the matter, socialism requires politicians to honestly administer more of the country's economy. From your understanding and knowledge of politicians, looking at the political landscape as we see it, Dr. Rowley, Kamla Prasad Bissessa, Dr. Rudal Munilal, Faris Al Rawi, Colm Imbert, those guys. Do you want them to get more of this country's resources under their control? Do you think, like, okay, if you work per day and make $300 for your day job, who do you think would spend that $300 better? Do you think if you keep the money for yourself, would spend that $300 better? Or do you think if you give the money to Colm Imbert for him to distribute it throughout the country as best as he sees fit, that it would be better used? Communism attempts to tell us, communism and socialism to a large part, attempts to tell us that the centralized redistribution of the country's resources would be better utilized than the individual free market distribution. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. It seems like you have to go to many years of university for someone to convince you of that kind of non-human nonsense. To me, it sounds like nonsense to me. Like at the end of my workday, if I collect my money in my hand cash and someone comes up to me attempting to convince me that Mr. Calm Imbud is actually going to be the best person to spend this for you, you know. If you give all your money to Mr. Calm Imbud, he would make sure that all your needs are met. Maybe you can get a food card and the government would make sure to redistribute money back for your food and make sure that your daughter is well taken care of. If you give the government your resources to distribute, they will know how best to allocate your resources. I am sorry. If I have a choice in the matter, I will keep my resources and I will decide how my resources are allocated. And here's the thing, if I have that ability, then there's an incentive for me to gain more resources. Our electoral system doesn't allow for us to actually hold them accountable. Okay, name an electoral system that would allow for us to keep politicians accountable enough for us to give them more of our money. Name one and show me the socialist country that implemented such an electoral system. Because what you notice in many of the socialist countries is electoral systems disappear altogether as they gain power. Because, I mean, look into the Cuban election processes. There's a reason one brother was in power for all the time. One brother was in power for all the time, and when he became too old and sickly, his other brother came into power. Like, you believe that's a fair electoral process? That's basically a monarchy. It's kind of ironic to me that I'm talking about currently. I see. After the brothers finished their reigns, then true communism and socialism stepped in. I'm sorry if I struggle to believe that. I'm sorry if I struggle to believe that. And what I know of many, Cuba included, and China has a system similar, many communist socialist style governments, what they do is the small people inside of it. So in China, there is change in local governments, the local politicians change. And the senior, so it's like PNM Central Party Council comes into PNM Local Party Council in Lopino District, and they come in and they clean up the area. You know, they fire out the secretary and the chairman of that area, and they bring in new people. They clean up the corruption. But it's the same PNM, the same Communist Party. You cannot get rid of the party. The party shuffles the deck for you, but it's the same party. So I don't know how we're going to get a different electoral system to get politicians we trust enough that at the end of my workday, instead of me keeping my money for me to use, I will give it to them for them to use better. They don't have a party system anymore. You don't have to have a party system for there to be one ruling oligarchy. It doesn't need to be a party. It could be any other name you want to call it. But if it's the same people with the same ideological bend, for all intents and purposes, it's a party. It's a party for all intents and purposes. And I'm pretty sure you won't prefer living in the Cuban system. Or you won't. You always run out of other people's... Like, if you had the option, would you donate all of your paycheck to the government for them to distribute it? No, you won't. You really won't. Exactly. And you would become the freeloader. And you would wait until the other people work and you get their resources. Obviously, that's where the incentive lies. And if you are interested in working harder, you leave. And that's why people will jump on a raft and try to sail across from the tip of Cuba to Miami on the open ocean just to escape.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why. They want the opportunity. They don't go to the United States looking for someone to give them social security. All they want is to be able to work today and keep today's wages. They will swim across the ocean for that ability. But capitalism leads to corporate oligarchies, though. Isn't that what is happening now? I agree. Capitalism in the way it is run right now, and me being more capitalist, I blame a lot of this on the fact that capitalism isn't run fully capitalist. There's a lot of socialist policies, and more keep being added in. Like Trinidad and Tobago has a heavy dose of, a heavy dose of socialist policies, really heavy dose. So has a really heavy dose of socialist policies. So I would say some of the corporate oligarchies that we see is because of some of those policies, is because the government oftentimes comes in and leans on it. So, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, let's look at the car market. Trinidad and Tobago has several very large car sales, new car sales groups, companies. There was once a point in time, I regularly make this point because it's one I'm first-hand acquainted with. Once upon a time, during the People's Partnership, there was a blossoming of many people bringing in and selling cars because it was allowed. It was easy to happen. You were able to just go, import a vehicle, bring it in, sell it here. The PNM government came in, changed the taxes, and now small men can't do that. Only the biggest guys could. They changed the tax scheme also, and now the small men can't bring in individual goods and sell anymore. So many of those online stores that you saw blossoming in 2010 to 2015, everyone had an online store. Everyone was selling something. I don't know how many of you were online in that period. Everyone had an online store. Order now. All of it is shut down now because it's just not profitable anymore. The government did that. That wasn't the capitalist free market system that caused a concentration of power in the retail market. That was the government. The government went out of their way to ensure that the retail market is concentrated under fewer corporations. Cement. We had a company in Trinidad forcing cement competition. There was a race of cement prices downward. The government implemented changes, forcing the company to operate at a loss. A company cannot operate at a loss, so they leave, monopolizing the market again. It's not the free market capitalism that does that. It's the government. So if you're telling me that the problem is when we concentrate power into fewer people's hands, the solution for that cannot be to give the fewer people in government more power. The lie of socialism and communism is that it's the power of the people. It's not. It's like trade unions, where they lie and pretend it's the power of the people. No, it's the power of the trade union leader. The person in power, the person who is at the front. So yes, it's the people. The people own Petrotrin, and the people own PTSC, and the people owned Caroni. Did the people choose to close Petrotrin? Did the people have a say in how the profits of Petrotrin were dispersed? That happens because under capitalism, the people with the capital control everything. So they lobby. Okay, and under socialism, who would be the people with the power? You say the problem is under capitalism, the people with the power are the people with the capital. Okay. There would be people with power in socialism. Who would those people be? Let me tell you who those people would be. Those people would be the best rabble-rousers, as we call them. The people most able... No, not the people... The people cannot all make the decision. The people must have a representative. You know, Stalin, Mao, those guys, the person, not the people, the person. And who would that person be? Well, that person would be the person who can ascend the highest political rank. Now, we are at a fork in the road here now. We're saying that in one system, the people with the power are the people with the capital, the people with the money. And the other system, the people with the power are the people who could most convince people. If you had to live in a system where one group has to have the power, you can't have a system without a group having the power. One group always has the power. That's how these systems go. Hierarchies exist. If you have to live in a system with one of those two, would you prefer a system where the people at the top are the people who Sometimes it's inheritance, but many times it's because they provide a service or a resource so effectively that they're able to accumulate the most, or one where the people at the top are the people who are able to convince the most people. You see, one of these is basically merit based. The idea of the people with the most capital having the power is you're using capital as a proxy for merit, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but there's grounds for this at least. You're saying that, okay, well, this person, if if Bill Gates was able to utilize the resources of Microsoft in such a way to create a product that everyone in the world wants, well, then I would want Bill Gates to get the resources produced by Microsoft because he has shown himself capable of using those resources. Or is it that we want Bill Gates, the guy who has the knowledge, to do that? He creates the resources, but no, we take the resources from him and give it to Joe Biden to redistribute. Does that make sense? I don't think so. I think if I had a preference, I would prefer the people who are able to create the resources, control where the resources go, because they have shown themselves able to create the resources. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect system. Yes, you would have corruption. Yes, you would have power concentrating. That's the nature of how those things go. It happens. But there's no other perfect alternative. You cannot point out the imperfections of the current system or of one system and say it's bad while the other alternative is worse. It doesn't work like that. There is no perfect alternative. I mean, if there was a perfect alternative, Grant point me towards it, I'd say yes. That's why if you're telling me that there's an alternative where I could choose the Lord Jesus Christ himself to come down and be the supreme leader of my country, and he runs my country in perfection, then fine, I'll choose that option. But there isn't that option. Amy Claire says Bill Gates, the man, is not the person who creates the product. He just owns the means of production. Ah, you sound like a socialist through and through. But here's the thing. People misunderstand. And I've dealt with some people who talk like this. They misunderstand the ability to use the means of production. Okay, I own my contracting firm. I make the deals. I buy the equipment and import it. I may not be throwing mortar onto the wall, but the guy who throws mortar onto the wall did not have the resources to do what I did. And bear in mind what the resources are is accumulated work by and large. Someone accumulated the work for me to get the resources to put the investment there and get the material. Of course, I own the means of production. I bought it. And if I was the one able to utilize my means of production in such a way to create a massive company, it shows I have skill in utilizing the means of production, because everyone can't do it. And you're going to tell me that I'm going to remove the power of controlling resources from people who have shown themselves able to magnify and multiply resources and put it in the control of countries that run every year on a deficit. People that cannot run a business to save their lives. People that run Petrotrain into the ground. People that run Caroni into the ground. Every single state company runs into the ground. But I'm going to remove the power, the control from the guys who have shown that they're able to multiply those resources. Take it from them, and here you go to the guys who run everything into the ground. Because I care for people. That's why. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, think kinds of the and the thing, especially about nothing. Um, so
And Ron, Ronnie, I don't disagree with your point, you know. But that's kind of the point I'm making. I am not saying that all socialist leaders start off from an evil point of view. But the incentive structure of the thing makes it impossible to work. Just like you're saying, the problem with state companies is not that state companies themselves can't function. And the problem with state companies is that the incentive structure of them make them can't function. That's kind of what you're saying. So that is the problem. The incentive structure. Sorry?
Socialist idea to make totally sense. Initiative to do it.
Correct. Amy Claire says, what do they do with the resources that they are multiplying? They reinvest it. You know, this is another socialist argument that doesn't make sense. When you see Elon Musk, his net worth is 100 and something billion or something like that. When you see that as his net worth, he is not he's not going and taking bread out of your hand, and he has $100 million in bread that could be distributed to everyone else in the world. He has that stored in a vault somewhere in his backyard. That's not what it means. It means that the combination of all the companies that he controls is worth that amount of money. So if you want that money to run healthcare, the government healthcare that buses all the time, if you want that money, here's what you're actually going to have to do to get the money. You're going to have to liquidate his companies and assets. All of the companies that employ people and pay them, the thousands of people, liquidate them, get the money, and give the government to run a busing business. Or leave the guy that's running a successful business, creating resources for the nations, creating technology that the nations use, creating jobs for the people. Governments have different objectives, so government businesses won't have the same results. Exactly. And the idea of a business is to be profitable. So if it's not to be profitable, then it won't run properly. That's the whole point. That's exactly my issue. Chavez had good intentions, he just didn't plan for the oil price to drop that much, and corruption helped it along the way. Amy Claire says it's not true that nobody has any impetus to work without being forced to at threat of their life. It's not have any impetus to work at all. But here's a question. How many people do you know wanted to be artists or wanted to be poets? I know quite a few people wanted to be poets. If they had the opportunity to get a government salary and write lame poetry for the rest of their life, would they have done that? Versus now, where they cannot do that, they have to actually go out there and get a job and maybe work taxi or something and give someone a ride across the country. They would sit down and do poetry and suck off the government teeth and do nothing. Why? It doesn't have to turn a profit to continue working. Amy Claire, you don't understand how things function. You have to turn a profit to continue working, Amy Claire. Let's take it away from money, because people don't understand money. Money is representative of resources. If I have corn in a cornfield and I plant a certain amount of corn and I am losing corn every year, eventually I wouldn't have enough corn to keep giving my workers corn. Where does the corn come from? What a profit means is that I am producing more corn than I am expelling or spending. That means I can increase with time. The only thing that could be sustainable other than that is if I produce exact and cut even. And that's not what they do. If I have a corn farm and I'm giving my workers more corn than I am producing, I would have to get corn from somebody else. I have to turn a profit to continue working. That's the very definition of how businesses function. If you don't turn a profit, You have to steal somebody else's resources to keep functioning. And Amy Claire, I don't mean this as a personal insult, but that sentence shows the problem with socialists and communists. They don't understand how systems function. Food isn't printed from government money printers. Government money printers print money. Money is representative of real value that requires real work. That's why the socialism doesn't work. Because socialists believe that it doesn't need to turn a profit to continue working. And eventually, because of that, it stops working. See Petrotrin, see Carney, see, it seems, NIB. You can break even. Why does there have to exist excess and expand exponentially? Let me explain that too, Amy. You see, here's why. Remember, if you go under even, the thing collapses. So you need to go even or above even to keep it running. All right. In that case, imagine this. Let's paint a picture. There's a trampoline that you have to bounce on to reach to a ledge. And that's the ledge you have to hold on to save your life. If you have to bounce on that trampoline to reach the ledge, are you going to aim to get enough bounce just so that as you reach the top of your bounce, your fingers reach the ledge, like you reach the top of the bounce and your fingers reach? Yes, I reach. That's what breaking even is. Or are you going to attempt to bounce as high as possible so that just in case any peradventures happen along the way, you would still be able to make it? That's why there's no upward aim for profit. That's why. And then that's one side, just not allowing the thing to collapse, trying to make sure the thing continues. That's one reason to aim for profit. The other reason is goal-oriented. If for example, I'm a teacher. I like teaching. I think my style of teaching has benefit. I think there's benefit to this for the world. I would like to see my business grow because I'd like to teach more people using this technique. The only way my business grows is if I get resources to invest and grow my business. The only way I get resources to invest and grow my business is if I make a profit. We function in an economic system that is based on scarcity. Eventually, resources run out. Then what? Scarcity is not the idea that resources would run out, you know. It's that everyone isn't able to get as much as they want. It's not that resources would run out necessarily. And I don't believe that by and large resources would run out. That's not the issue. That's not the issue. And if you're saying that in terms of then don't aim for growth, I don't agree with that aim on it. You see, the way how nearly every living organism as it works is it grows. And generally speaking, if it doesn't grow, it shrinks. And most businesses function like that too. That's just how business functions. If you have okay, Cakery Couture run his business out there. If every year you're attempting to sell just as many cakes as you sold last year, the chances are one of the people you sold to last year may not want a cake this year. Or they might die. Or they decide to turn a religion that doesn't celebrate birthdays anymore. Something could happen. Your risk is you could only lose. You have no gain. You could only lose. However, if you're aiming at constantly growth, if you lose some, it's okay. You're aiming at growth. Gas has already run out, hence the gas deal. RL says, I think TNT has been so rich for decades, people forget how expensive it is to run an island without globalization. There's a point to that. There's a point to that. We have been so rich for so long, I think some people misunderstand what money is. When I listen to many public servants, I recognize they don't understand what money is. When they demand a raise with putting no reciprocal increase in value into the system. So when you take more out of the system without putting more value in, what you're doing is removing resources from someone else in the system. That's actually what you're doing.
What more you want to have, you would like for everything to stay same. You can't think stay in the same price because get the going takes money to give you is on a product then it's possible in the tax bill. So everything else is gonna go up. I understand that so much times, right? There's a trade-off to it, right? To it, the huge salary sector stand they look at select right but sector workers don't get salary. So you get job security application. I service application, right? You still want still want you still want thing to be low, you to be high, to give absolutely everything you want. That is just to me. If ever thing it will absolutely
That's communism style for you too. Marie, scarcity. Mary says scarcity means we have a limited amount of resources for all to share. Excess means others don't have. So that means resources run out. Can you give me an example? Give me an example of where there's a wealthy person in a capitalist style system who is collecting so much of some scarce resource. Their collection of the resource is meaning that other people cannot access it, that otherwise would have. Where's that an example? Like some billionaire that has taken up all the food.
too long. Simple.
I agree. And I think that's a biblical principle. Not I think, that is a biblical principle. And I find that that should be a principle in the land that we live in. If you don't work, you don't eat. By the sweat of his brow should a man live. Which means that when you work, you are paid based on your work. That's free market. You are paid based on how much you work. You work more, you get paid more. You work less, you get paid less. That kind of idea that everybody should get everything. No, everybody shouldn't get everything. No one owes you anything. You are owed nothing.
Especially if
My one of my favorite quotes: "Nobody cares. Try harder." That's it. That's what you're owed. The idea that somehow all of us are supposed to somehow come together and owe you this, like we are supposed to owe you a living wage. What is a living wage? A living wage in some places is 50 cents, and you have to live or don't. Come on, it doesn't work like that. People now are working on average much more than those in the past and are making way less. That is a lie from the pits of hell, Amy Claire. That's a lie if I have ever heard one. Amy Claire, there is not a single era in human history that you would legitimately prefer to live in than the modern era. Name another time in human history that you would have preferred living in. Name another time in human history where there was more access in general to to the joint wealth of humanity. Name another time.
Adam any guy that would
Ah, me too, Ronnie. Me too, maybe me too, maybe me too. That's the only other time. because there was not like that's the thing with the communist kind of thing, and they compare imperfection to the dreamy maybe in Karl Marx's imagination of his utopian dream. There's none of that. There was none of it. There was never it. What's this perfect alternative that you have? When was this perfect world in existence that you would like to go back to? You could look at the rates of death. You don't want those times.
You could see socialism doesn't work. So more people would have done more socialists because it may not be it's better than the alternative, which is socialism. Socialism.
Is the quote is from Winston Churchill, I believe. I know I'm gonna butcher the quote. I can't remember it word for word, but something like um the democracy, and he was saying that in the capitalist way, is the worst form of government besides the others, or something to that effect. I am not looking to go back. Places don't have it because they get destabilized. Of course, that's the only reason why.
Besides capital, communism, I think that would people like
No, 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 no. It's not the communism this destabilizing them. It's that America wouldn't trade with them. You have created the perfect system to run your country, but your perfect country cannot run perfectly because the devils that run on capitalism, which is a bad system, capitalism doesn't work. But the devils that run on that failing system won't trade with you in your super successful system. And that is why it doesn't work.
you
Mm-hmm.
know what in my 10, 20, 20, so soon um says and every susu but susu was trying
Ah! Hey, what you saying?
some
Freeze is taking the live on Instagram, eh? Freeze, that's Ronnie's World over on TikTok.
my feeling and that they want to take out the safety man. So obviously not escape. So so glad say Jesus so much. I get the answer
Yes.
because it's passion.
Amy Claire, I know the CIA admitted to purposefully destabilizing countries with war. That's true. The CIA has put their hands in countries all over the world. I don't deny that. But you know, the CIA also destabilizes the United States. Like you're talking about taking out world leaders. It is well reputed that the CIA took out JFK, the US leader. So I mean, if you're blaming CIA destabilization, the CIA destabilizes the United States itself too. The CIA is, as it were, a governing body only unto itself. So if everyone faces their destabilization can't be your only reason. Destabilization can't be your only reason why the economy doesn't add up. Are you telling me a CIA plant in your country whispering in somebody's ear is causing the economy to crash? Is causing famine? The CIA is making it that enough food cannot be grown? The CIA wasn't involved in the Holodomor in Soviet Union. The CIA didn't exist back then. There's a whole position in the CIA that their job is to destabilize communist countries. That, yes, that was once a mandate of the CIA partially, but it's not only communist countries. As I just mentioned, the CIA is credited with taking out JFK, who was not a communist. So it's not just communist countries. The CIA has repute of dealing in European countries that aren't communist countries. So are you telling me the only reason communist countries don't work is because the CIA is so skilled they take down every communist country? Like, you honestly buy that? Someone sold you that story and you bought it? Are you telling me then that the KGB, the communist versions of the CIA, are just so honest that they won't try to take down capitalist countries? So then how come they don't succeed? How come it's just the capitalists could take down the communists, but the communists don't seem to be able to take down the capitalists? No, it can't be. It can't, because communism is utopian. It's perfect. How can you destabilize a perfect country? How is it possible to destabilize a country when everyone is getting what they need? You know, the strange thing is, the communists have written, I don't know how much communist material you read. The communists in the United States and in Europe wrote about the fact that capitalism was working too well in the United States, and that's why it didn't work. The creation of critical theories, which are neo-Marxist offshoots, they were based on the fact that that capitalism delivered the goods in the United States, and some of the communists in the mid-20th century did a course correction because they said the idea of trying to stir up class divisions in the United States won't work because the United States has the highest mobility between the classes, or at least had at one point in time. That's because the capitalism system was kind of working. You don't have class mobility in communism. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen. Anyway, it's nearly 12 people. It's nearly 12. You all know if you want to get me start talking long, we jump in communism and socialism. Really gets me going. Because like to me, I find it kind of dumbfounding that human beings would understand other human beings and think that somehow a communist system would work. Like from the age of 6, if you go 2 years of primary school and see humans and understand communism not going to work. Like, the fact that big people out there somehow are convinced of this scares me. Honestly, it scares me. This is where dialectical materialism comes in. Capitalism leads to socialism, leads to communism. Yeah, that's what the Marxists would love, isn't it? All right, people, discussion had been deep tonight. Thank you, Shazam. Ronnie, any closing words before we dive out?
Socialism, just like Susu, that's no on them, so that they're gonna just strip it and the mash up with thing. You understand what?
Because I think, Ronnie, you finished? Sorry. I hope I interrupted. I think the reason for that is because the United States are not paragons of virtue. The United States mission is not to make every country function perfectly. They have selfish intent. All right, there's the selfish intent personal, well, selfish intent country-wise, where the US government may be seeking the best interests of the United States as a country. There's that side. And the best interest of the United States as a country would not always mean the best interest of the other people. So it works in the United States' best interest to almost always have an imbalance in their trades. And if they could do things to artificially ensure the imbalance remains there, I think they would. So that's one. And then the people involved, there's the individual side of benefit. where, like, they allege Joe Biden himself had intentions for getting monetary benefits out of Ukraine and China, etc., etc. So some of the policies you see coming from them as pertains to Ukraine, Russia, as pertains to China and their dealings, has nothing to do with the best for America or the best for the world or the best for anyone's moral. It has to do sometimes with the best for, per se, Joe Biden, his monetary benefit. And that's what you see. That's what you see very often. You see the machinations of individuals looking for their best interests, and also the United States looking for their best interest also. It just so happens that the United States has sold themselves as being morally upstanding. So everything that they do, they must somehow sell it under the banner of being for someone's best interest, because that's the image of themselves they sold. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. What's up?
I think sorry, enjoy.
Laters, folks. This has been the Mindful Live. I am Nathan Spring. I'll see you guys again for the next Mindful Live, which is going to be tomorrow night around that 9:30 p.m. time. Tonight. Blame the KFC delivery guy tonight. But I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. I'll see you guys again for the next one. This has been brought to you by Mindful Education, the educational institution that I run. We offer learning pods, homeschool style classes for most learning stages from preschool up to CXC. We also offer private tuition one-on-one with tutors for most CXC and CAPE subjects. If you are interested in that, jump out. You go in and eat that cold KFC. There's no better KFC than cold KFC, darling. Peace. I'm out.